Hi everyone, Anthony Vertano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Maggie Rogers record, Heard It in a Past Life. Singer, songwriter, and producer Miss Maggie Rogers, she has a new full-length album out over here. She is coming in hot with a lot of promo. Despite only recently dropping a big commercial album with Capitol Records, Maggie's artistic trajectory has been heavily documented, as if music audiences have been following her every move up until this point. You can go online and read endlessly about everything from what she used to listen to when she was younger, to the Berklee music program that she won a songwriting award with, dropping a few albums independently, and auditioning a song for Pharrell that literally brought him to tears.
It's okay to cry, Anthony.
I'm too sick for this right now.
You're just ashamed of your emotions, and I hate to see it. It kills me.
Then there's Maggie's label signing, her fledgling hit, her SNL appearance. It's been a very guided rise to prominence, which, you know what, is fine. I honestly wish today's music industry did more to invest in up-and-coming artists as opposed to ambulance chasing every single viral internet hit. And knowing that's the current state of things, I went into this record assuming that Maggie has something special and substantive, something that doesn't quite translate to the mimetic passageways that most music is promoted through today. Plus, this LP did get number 2 on the Billboard Top 200, even if it was released super early in the year and only moved a very modest 37,000 copies. I'm also pretty delighted to see talented names like Greg Kurstin in on the production of this record on some key tracks. But overall, the sound and the style and the aesthetic of this record, it's kind of a hodgepodge. It has the synthetic grooves of a synth-pop album, but also the relatability of like a folk or a singer-songwriter record. There's also a low-key sensuality to it, like a classic SYNTHPOP band like Prefab Sprout, to a degree, to a very subtle degree. There are also some tracks on this thing that are pretty anthemic and grandiose, which feels like yet another nod to the 80s, especially on the closing track here. There's also a few points on this record where I can tell Maggie is pulling pretty directly from some heavy hitters out of the huge wave of female singer-songwriters that were banging the charts in the 90s. And finally, I think there's something about Maggie's sound that would really appeal to Haim fans. The super funky and poppy guitar and bass-based sound coming out of some of the songs on this record, it really does feel like something off of a Haim album. I do like the very danceable and moody and sexy production surrounding a lot of these tracks. If anything, the beats and the instrumentals on this thing, they really are a huge selling point, like the plucky bass line and nocturnal atmosphere and swaying groove of The Knife. The song Overnight is similarly moonlit and sad and, I guess, romantic. The track also exudes the kind of cinematic depression you can only afford to soak in if you have nothing else wrong going on in your life. The track Say It feels like a bit of a throwback to an old school 90s R&B jam, but with some production updates, some bubbly arpeggios. Probably my favorite track on here, as it's attached to one of the best tunes on the record too. But the instrumentation and the mixing across this entire record, it's not amazing. There are some points where it comes off very shoddy. Like on the opening track Give a Little, which has a complete lack. It's totally devoid of like any appealing melodies. The lead vocal melody that Maggie is singing on the opening verse of this track, it's absolutely mind-bending as to why somebody would record this and save it. Like most of everything else on this track, it sounds totally thrown together and just on this song to pad out time around the chorus, which is actually pretty decent. There are also some tracks on here that are just drowning in this overly sentimental vibe, like Light On, which kind of runs like Bruce Springsteen at his worst with Avicii's Wake Me Up. There's also a total loss of personality at some points on this thing, like on the piano ballad from this record, Past Life, which in some moments sounds like a really off Jewel or Regina Spektor impression. Plus, this song is one of a few moments on this LP where Maggie just seems too overcome with emotion to worry about whether or not she's straining vocally or articulating the words she's actually saying. It just feels very performative, which I understand all music is to some degree, but I feel like the key to a great performance is to trick the audience into thinking that what you're doing there in front of the lenses and the lights, it's all natural. I can't say Maggie has gotten over that hump though. But even when Maggie is at her best vocally on this album, her singing is still pretty average. I could not honestly pick her voice out of a lineup if you made me. There are also a few eyebrow-raising instrumentals on this LP that I just can't really get my head around, like the song On Off, which features this really heavy sub bass and skipping pianos and weird sound effects. It sounds like what you would do if you tried to remix a bunch of pieces from an old One-O-Trix Point Never track into a pop tune, but the results were not satisfying at all. And then we have the super chunky beats and sad piano chords on the Cut Falling Water, which basically feels like what would happen if you gave a generic Macklemore guest singer the opportunity to just do a full song by themselves. My ears throughout this track were stinging with anticipation for the moment Macklemore was going to pop in and start whisper rapping about like white privilege or his ice cream hitting the ground. Then there's also the super overdriven and distorted beat on the cut Burning, which literally does sound like burning. There are some quite horrid points on this instrumental that I can't believe nobody attached to this record heard this and thought, you know, this is like an opportunity for a redo. I mean, the production being this much of a mess is not the case for every song on this record, but it happens enough times to ruin the overall experience pretty heavily. Plus, this record is also pretty short on memorable songwriting, personality coming out of the vocals. Past Life does have its bright spots, but they're mostly predicated on the instrumental being really danceable and lush, like on the cut Retrograde. Meanwhile, more low-key cuts on this thing, like Alaska, are so faint it's like the song thrives off of this really vague quirk that doesn't really get appealing until the hook. But I think I'm gonna leave it at that. I dislike this record quite a bit. Way more misses than hits on this thing. Definitely. There are points on this thing that are super average, super uninteresting, risks that don't really pay off, but above all else, despite the gargantuan sense of drama being injected into multiple tracks here, it's just boring. I'm feeling a strong 3 to a light 4 on this thing. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell and don't miss a single piece of content. And we will see you guys in the next one. Anthony Fantano, Maggie Rogers, forever.